Quick note, I was part of this story, but not the dealer nor receiver of the revenge. Years ago, I used to work with a receptionist in a vet clinic named Margot. Margot was, and still is, a very sweet 65-year-old woman who had been at this practice since it was opened, some 40 years ago. She always had a smile, a joke, compliments, and baked goods for your birthday. She never had an unkind word to say about anyone. She was seriously one of the coolest people I had ever worked with, and she basically knew everyone, from our regular clients to our mailman's granddaughter. The only bad thing about Margot, and this was not her fault, was that she and her family lived next to one of the trashiest, nastiest families I had ever met that had two even nastier pit bulls. I'm talking nastier than shit that had been hoarded by dung beetles for years nasty. And these dogs were constantly escaping and terrorizing the neighborhood, even trying to get into her house. Margot had asked them more than once to please keep the dogs contained, especially since she had an elderly fat cat named Smokestack, and these pits had attacked smaller animals before. The family basically told her to rot in hell, that they knew what they were doing. How dare she accuse the breed, yada yada, basically blowing her off. Margot knew there had been reports filed against her neighbors, but nothing had ever been done about it really. So she made sure to keep Smokestack in the house to keep him safe, and was very careful not to let him out. If you had been paying attention up until this point, you'll notice I'm using the word was and had regarding old Smokestack. And it was as awful as you think. 3 weeks before Christmas, Margot had the day off and was in the garage with Smokestack fiddling with some Christmas decorations. Unbeknownst to her, the pits next door got out and broke through the bottom of her garage door. They went right for Smokestack before she could blink and started to tear the cat apart. Margot screamed for help, and it was only when her son and husband came out with a baseball bat that they were able to free Smokestack from the jaws of these dogs. I was working this day and will never forget when she came in crying harder than I had ever seen anyone cry in my life, clutching poor dying Smokestack in her arms. Her husband had to hold her while we tried to bring Smokestack back, but we couldn't do it. It would have taken a miracle of God and then some, and he passed away. A truly crap way to go in what should have been the golden years of his fat cat life. Margot sat there for a while with his mangled body, quietly crying for a while before she finally kissed whatever part of him was still intact and stood up. She told us all, "I've got a job to do. Take care of him, girls." And then left. We figured Margot would take a few days off to be with family and then continue on with life as normal. We figured wrong. Now, when I say Margot knew everyone, I mean everyone. Right after she left the hospital, Margot gathered herself up and went to the police with pictures of poor Smokestack and told her story. The same police officers she had watched grow up over the last 20 years, from rowdy middle schoolers she used to help babysit to the officers they were today. They were absolutely shocked to hear what had happened to their surrogate grandma and pushed her case to the front of the line. The case found itself before a judge whose daughter had gone to school with Margot's daughter. The judge granted an emergency dangerous animal extraction warrant to her neighbors. Of course, there was a hearing. Within 2 weeks, which I gotta admit was ridiculously fast, the neighbors tried to argue that their dogs weren't aggressive. They even went so far as to accuse Margot of having it out for their family and making it all up. But their argument trickled when the dozens of dangerous animal reports were presented and finally completely dried out when Margot presented the surveillance video her grandson had gotten showing the dogs coming into her property and attacking poor Smokestack. The emergency extraction and humane destruction of her neighbor's dogs was granted. It was Christmas Eve when Margot heard a knock on her door. She opened it up to see the neighbors standing there, sobbing uncontrollably. They were begging her to stop animal control, that they had these dogs since they were puppies, how the kids would be devastated and it would ruin Christmas, and if she could find it in her heart to give the dogs another chance. Up until this moment, the neighbors had behaved abominably. They didn't offer to fix the garage. They never apologized for trying to slander her name in court. Hell, they didn't even pay for Smokestack to be cremated. At no point, had they even shown the slightest shred of remorse for what damage their dogs had done. And as the neighbors stood there, blubbering and whimpering about how this was going to ruin their Christmas, Margot looked them straight in the eye and told them, in her calmest voice, "You took away my family, so now I'm taking yours," and shut the door in their face just as animal control pulled up onto the driveway. Margot was not surprised as she watched the dogs get hauled into the truck and taken away. After all, it was her idea for animal control to take the dogs on Christmas Eve, a perk from having known the Axe officer's supervisor for years. Margot even made sure the dogs were euthanized before the outside Christmas lights turned on that night. The family never received the remains, nor did they ever get a chance to bring another animal into their family as the father proceeded to drunk drive into a telephone pole that same night, killing him instantly. Mom went off the deep end, so Child Protective Services picked up the kids by February. And ultimately, the house foreclosed in September. Despite how traumatic Smokestack's death was, I'd like to think that if the neighbors had shown at least some regret, Margot might not have gone as far as she did. She was still the person to forgive and forget. Or maybe she ultimately knew it had to be done, to push it to this point of no return before another family lost a member to these irresponsible neighbors. Either way, thank you, Margot, for making the world a little bit safer for the pets in the world. And rest in peace, Smokestack. Hopefully, I'll see you on the other side with your favorite orange sock and a can of tuna. Every November, you, 24-year-old female, receive a dreaded text in our extended family group chat from my cousin, 35-year-old female. The text includes a highly detailed Christmas list from her 5-year-old, who we'll call Penny. The items are always expensive, obscure, and very hard to find. Additionally, she expects us to reply with the item we have purchased, then sends back the updated list with that item checked off. Each year, there's exactly the number of items for people in the chat, and once people hurry to claim the cheapest ones, you're left with $100, $300 items to choose from. My cousin is an only child and her mom caters to this as well as her dad, but the rest of us are getting pretty sick of it. Last year, someone didn't follow the list and said they'd already bought something else in the group chat, and she responded, "That isn't what Penny wants this year," which made them feel guilty for not adhering to this insanity. Now, some backstory. Penny has autism, is nonverbal, and the sweetest child ever. My cousin and her husband are good parents for the most part, but they're a little self-focused. For example, they are both collectors of things like manga and toys and lose their minds if Penny touches their things, and the home is full of their collections. They have an entire room dedicated to this, which they call the fun room, and their daughter isn't allowed in. Not so fun? Now, here's the kicker. The items on the list are almost always part of a collection. Either vintage, certain edition this or that, and tons of Beanie Babies. They have started a toy collection similar to their own for Penny, but it's a lot of things I've never seen her enjoy or show much interest in. One year, the most excitement she showed was for the box, and she loves Disney movies and Paw Patrol, but never has she gotten gifts related to these things. Also, we suggested some gifts like a toy kitchen or something interactive and sensory, and they shut that down in favor of expensive Lego. Star Wars? Lego. She's 5. I know damn well that's going straight to Daddy's fun room. This year, I'm getting her an Ariel doll and matching dress. I'm stopping madness. This story came from my friend's husband, Adam. And yes, this is Belle's husband. Belle's my retired Army officer friend. Adam worked as a police officer from the late 90s, early 10s until being injured in the line of duty. One December evening, Adam was finishing up his shift when Belle, who he was dating at the time, called him asking if he could pick up a couple of last-minute things for a Christmas party. Since the Mart of Walls is about a mile away from the station, Adam decides to go there. He's wearing a thick dark blue coat over his uniform, complete with vest, belt, and gear, including his sidearm, radio, handcuffs, and baton. He's in the dairy section, getting some cream when he heard a woman say in a low voice, "Excuse me?" Adam turns to look. There's a young woman, maybe college age, dressed in jeans, a thick coat, and heavily pregnant. Definitely not the Karen type. Can you please help me get TV from the back? Adam is about to use the classic, "I don't work here" lady line when he sees the fear in her eyes. Now on high alert, he leans close to her and whispers what happened. "I'm scared of my husband. He just shot the officer, pulled us over." Adam looks up and sees this strung-out looking man who looks like he hasn't showered in days and watching them with, as Adam recounted, shark eyes. Thinking fast, Adam says loud enough for the man to hear, "I'm more than happy to help you, ma'am. Let me page the back and we'll get it in a minute. Hang tight." Using his cell phone, which wasn't as common as it is now, he texted a fellow officer who was still on duty, asking her if an officer got shot. When she confirmed it and asked what was going on, he told her what was going on, to alert the manager and to send a couple of units to the store. She responded to him that the units were on the way. The manager had been alerted and to hang tight. Once he received her text, he said it's on its way to the front. "I'll personally escort you there so the manager knows who it belongs to." So he leads the family to the front and makes eye contact with the manager. The manager, who recognizes Adam from previous excursions, comes over. "Adam, keeping up the charade," says to the manager boss. "I think it'd be good to get the lady off her feet for a little bit while we get the car loaded." He said with a meaningful look. "It's going to take several minutes anyway." The manager nods and says, "Of course, come with me, ma'am. My office is just this way." Once the lady and the manager were safely away, Adam and the man head out to the parking lot. Just then, Adam spots the officers getting out of their cars and nods at them. The takedown wasn't as dramatic as you'd expect it to be. They recognized him and arrested him as soon as several outstanding warrants for his arrest were revealed. The officer the man had attacked survived his injuries, and the man got a nice long prison sentence for several charges, including attempted murder. The lady filed for divorce and, with Adam and Belle's help, was able to get home to her family. Last Adam heard, she was doing well. When she heard the story, Belle, as she put it to me, knew I met the man I was going to marry someday. My neighbor and I aren't friends, but we wave when passing in vehicles or walking. About a year ago, my wife had ordered something for one of our kids, and it was delivered to the wrong house. Our house numbers and mailboxes are very similar and easy to confuse. Picture 668 and 688. After a couple days, I called and they sent me the photo taken of the box on my neighbor's porch, so I walked over to retrieve it and was told I brought it back to the shipping hub. I was heading in that direction anyway. When I asked why he didn't either text me or just walk next door, he didn't have an answer. Okay, very frustrating. It took 5 more days for our item to arrive, Lo. Well, on Friday afternoon, I'm off and I see a box being delivered to my porch. I go out to get it, see it's his package. On the small return portion of the ship label, it says, Lenovo, 1 day, rush, and the shipping sticker says like $31.39. My neighbor supposedly ordered a laptop by the weight of it and rushed it over. I picked it up and went straight to the shipping center. After all, my errands were done, so I was walking in at 4:50. Didn't want to risk they would try to re-deliver it before end of day. Yesterday, he came over with the photo of the box on my front deck to ask if I have his box and that it's important, and I responded I brought it back to be re-delivered. He looks almost enraged and says, "Why?" I said, "That's the exact same question I asked you when you did it previously. Just thought this was what you want going forward." He was walking down my driveway, shaking his head extra dramatically, but what's good for one should be good for all. No,